All right. Good morning, everybody. This is Spencer Parks with the Spark Show podcast. Pretty exciting episode today. After a little bit of a step away from the show due to a chaotic start to the new year, took a little time to kind of regroup and wanted to take a minute to introduce my guest on the show today, Cameron Collier, a good friend of mine, childhood best friend, and someone that I look up to dearly. So welcome to the show, Cam. Good to have you.
Good to be here.
Yeah, so today we thought we'd bring Cameron on because Cameron and I have started off. We started a company together. We've grown up together. We've done a lot of things together, and I think that one of the things that we enjoy most about each other's company is basically fleshing out some thoughts regarding politics and some other things like that. And wanted to flesh out some things that we had talked about recently, and I think one of those things might be Charlie Kirk. So. Just thought I'd start off by asking you, so what do you think about Charlie Kirk and how everything went down?
Well, I didn't really know much about him. I just would see clips of him on the internet, and I thought he was a pretty intelligent person, especially, after his death, all the clips that were coming across. It was pretty amazing to see how articulate he was at such a young age. I think I saw a clip from Fox News, maybe it was, and he was talking in such a clear manner at like 18 years old or something like that. And all I know is when I was 18, I certainly wasn't that mature.
Yeah, I think at 18 years old, we might have had similar thoughts to Charlie. We might have been starting a company of our own around that time as well. But we definitely were not starting a nationally recognized conservative youth movement that was going to span across the entire United States. And I don't think we knew Charlie was exactly going to be doing that, but that's what he set out to do.
Yeah, it was pretty amazing. You see, kind of like, looked like he was a extremely gifted athlete as well. I think he was a football quarterback, and I saw a clip of him throwing the ball, and it was like shocking. I was like, oh, I thought he was just a talking head, but more of that, more of a Renaissance man, I guess you could say.
Yeah, definitely a great athlete as well. I know in high school he was, I don't know much about basketball, but he was definitely a basketball player. Seen some of the clips of him playing high school basketball, throwing the football. The guy had an arm, and he definitely had a knack for sports.
Yeah, so it was pretty cool. But getting kind of into the whole, debacle of his, unfortunate assassination. I first heard about it, I was just working down in the San Fernando Valley, and I was actually on my way to get some lunch, and the news broke over, social media, and I just remember being overwhelmed with this incredible sense of anger and desire to do violence. And that was also immediately preceded by, seeking forgiveness, because, as the good book says, we shouldn't be having those thoughts. We should be controlling them. But, when you're faced with such senseless violence, it's like, how do you not react in such a visceral way? I didn't know who this guy was. I didn't really follow him too much, but just to kind of see, this father be murdered in a senseless act. It just, it was overwhelming in the moment.
Yeah, I remember when I first came across the assassination, I always told my wife that I'm about either a day or at least 12 hours ahead of the national media because of some of the independent news outlets that I follow on social media. Mm-hmm. And I can recall getting one of the first clips on my phone of Charlie being shot in the neck. And my first thought immediately was self-preservation. I didn't ever want anything bad happen to Charlie. It was, he's going to be okay. He's going to make it. I saw him go down, but it looked like, his security team had recovered him, got him to the vehicle pretty quick and got him off to the hospital. And so I maintained the hope, he's going to be okay. He's going to make it. And it wasn't too long after that some of the more graphic videos started to emerge, where we saw the amount of blood that he lost and what the impact of, the supposed bullet was. And that was pretty devastating, because the minute I saw the amount of blood loss, I was like telling my wife, he's not going to make it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I purposely didn't watch any of that stuff. I knew it was going to be gruesome right away, just based off of what other people were saying. And what would it benefit me to see such carnage? So I've actually strayed away from watching anything to do with, any of the conspiracies around it, anything. Like I don't want anything to do with it. Fact of the matter is that a man who was in charge of a huge political movement, a groundswell, was taken out, and he was taken out for a purpose. And it doesn't really matter what the details of who did it, how they did it, all that, all the gossip that ensues. Because I think all that is a purpose to create a dust up, a fog of war where you can't understand, you can't see what the real facts of the matter are.
Yeah, and if you were an avid follower of Charlie Kirk, supporter of Charlie Kirk, then you knew that at any of his events, he was somebody who was open to debate, and he loved and was passionate about speaking to people with opposing views, people who wanted to disagree. Mm-hmm. He openly welcomed disagreement to the microphone, so that way he could, argue in his best, to his best. Basically to meet in the middle, to find common ground with people. Mm-hmm. And to me, I think the most frustrating part about what could lead to such a heinous act of violence is just knowing what good he was trying to do in the world, and that he basically was killed for that.
Well, I mean, it just highlights the danger of echo chambers and allowing your thoughts to be dominated by hate and a hatred for someone that you've never even had a conversation with, and you've only seen things taken out of context to create a narrative of who this person is in order to control you, to stay within your bubble of thought. So it's one of those things where I think I didn't, like I said, I only just watch clips and things like that, but to me, what he was doing was it wasn't necessarily trying to win arguments. It was to challenge critical thinking. And once you start thinking critically about these, nuanced subjects, you start to realize there's no simple solution when you're coming, to things like, oh, we just need communism. Communism's going to fix everything. And it's like, okay, well, what is communism? And at the end of the day, it's a group of people, a bureaucracy that has an inordinate amount of power, just like the bureaucracy that they're complaining about has today. And to think that that power isn't going to corrupt those people because they subscribe to a certain ideology, like that oligarchy isn't going to emerge. It's like, get out of here. It's human nature to be corrupted by these things. And when you start to follow the thread back to first principles, you realize that, there's really no simple answer to any of these things, and you really have to critically think and pull these things apart to look at it, through a critical lens.
Yeah, I think a lot about his Socialism Sucks tour, and how big he was as he was an opponent of communism, just a devout opponent of that. So the things that I really enjoyed listening to Charlie about was one of his big kind of foundational points was that the young generation now is, the first generation to be worse off than any of our grandparents' generation since World War II. Mm-hmm. And I think that was a valid point, because I think you and I can agree that just coming up from, public school education, elementary school, seeing, 9/11 unfold, and then we've seen, all of the horrendous things happening since then, and then to go through COVID, to see some of these other crazy things that have happened, these anomalies in our economy, Bitcoin coming to fruition and seeing what that's done, creating some of these sort of, what do you call, anomalies. I mean, things that you only see once in a lifetime. We've seen billionaires created overnight, and people killed for having certain beliefs. It's almost like we're kind of repeating history. But now being the age I am and living through the things I've seen, I'm starting to believe that there is patterns, and I think that the wealthy do benefit off of most of these things. But I do think that being a part of the generation that has had it worse off than, 3 generations of parents now, puts us in a bit of a predicament, with our belief systems. It makes us challenge and want to believe in something that isn't basically rooted in history. We want something maybe that's secular, which I think for the people that have their faith, I think you and I are both, have our faith, and we lean into that pretty hard. But I think that there's a lot of people out there who have abandoned that. And that's what's led us, and, many with opposing views, to look for something to be angry about, to try to find that's going to cure where we're at now as a nation in the United States.
Yeah, well, it's what do you hear a lot from the secular left? It's my truth, my truth, my truth, and you're just like, well, let's unravel that a little bit and let's see where that leads to. And you can see, okay, well, if you have a distribution amongst a population of 1 billion and everyone has disparate values, well, conflict is inevitable. But if there is the truth and everyone coalesces underneath the truth, then you have camaraderie and you have consensus. So it's like, it's a distribution. And when you see wealth and all these things, it's with anything in nature, it's the distribution of resources. It always, the cream rises to the top. So, what is the Pareto principle? The top 20% controls 80% of the resources, and this is just an inevitability that always happens, but it's always preceded by a collapse as well. So it's kind of scary. So you want to create, market conditions such that it enables fair trade. I hear this, I'm a free trade, free market capitalist, all this sort of stuff. And, and in theory, it makes perfect sense, right? You want to just allow people to compete in the market. However, when you have behemoths like Amazon or any of these AI companies and all this stuff, it's like, well, you need a fair market trade system to cut these large actors down to size, where it's like, look at Elon Musk. He's worth, what, last I checked, it was $750 billion. And, I'm not one of these guys that say, end billionaires or anything like that, but you can see the arguments that the left makes, where it's just like, it's a huge concentrated amount of power in one corruptible human being, and it poses a large risk on society at whole. So I think that's where our founders were so brilliant in the system that they created, because they didn't want to centralize power. They wanted to decentralize power. That's why we have states. That's why we have local governments. I think it's the American system has like 4,500 governments or something like that within, underneath the umbrella of the federal government. So it's one of those things where, yes, you're always going to have, look at, how Elon built his companies. Just balls of steel and just a firm belief in himself and his vision and an unrelenting drive to realize. And he's in industries that reward greatly. So it's no surprise, he's the richest guy in the world because of the choices that he made. Nevertheless, we have to think about the common good and come up with fair trade practices to where it's like, okay, well, at some point, how do we decentralize that amount of wealth and give it back down to those who don't? Because inevitably it's going to lead to revolution. It always has. You're just saying, look at the French Revolution, look at any revolution really,
Yep.
against the aristocracy,
I think one of the biggest things that makes, revolution or anarchy feel like such a great option for the youth right now, is that they feel desperate. Coming out of high school right now, everyone knows, it's no secret, everything is expensive. Home prices are artificially inflated from COVID. you go around town anywhere, I feel like in the United States right now, shopping malls where mom and pop stores used to fill every corner, we have more vacant spots than we have occupied spaces. We usually see more chains occupying standalone stores, Starbucks on every corner, fried chicken, whatever the concept is. It's no longer, small families or individuals who are able to take that leap of faith and jump into entrepreneurship anymore. Um, you know, they don't feel like wages that they can earn at, entry level jobs and work their way up the ladder. By the time they do anything like that, that they're not going to be able to afford anything, because right now where we're at, prices keep going higher, 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 and higher. And I think that's something that's working against capitalism right now, is that people aren't going to understand, when is this going to correct?
Yeah. Well, when I think back to when I was coming out of high school and I was looking at it, it wasn't, it was looking pretty bleak for me. And that's not to say that, the youth aren't facing a wider gap than I was facing, because that's absolutely true. But at the same time, I didn't really have much going for myself. All my friends were going off to college, and I was going to jump into the construction arena, tried that for a summer. I didn't really like waking up at, you know, depending on, where I was working. If I was working all the way down in Culver City, and I'm in northern LA, I had to wake my ass up at like 4:30, 4 in the morning, sometimes 3:45, and it's just work your ass off all day long. Don't stop moving. Skip lunch sometimes because you're just trying to get the job done, and all to do all that at 18 years old. And yeah, I'm gonna go back to school. Yeah, that was much better, waking up on my own time schedule. So yeah, I might not be making as much money, but I'll go figure it out. And I mean, I was a I was a bum in high school. I grade point average of maybe 1.2. I didn't put much thought into it. I only went to high school because of my friends. If I didn't have friends in school, I wouldn't have showed up. I wouldn't have graduated. And so I figured that out, and then just started from the bottom, just one class at a time, then two classes, then found my confidence, and then started taking school a little bit more seriously. But my friends, by the time I'm taking college seriously, my friends are graduating college at 22. I'm going, okay, I'm actually starting this thing. I didn't graduate till I was 27, with my basic ass degree, and around that time is, before that is when we started our own thing. But we weren't making that much money, like $30,000 a year, maybe, that was depending on how cash flows were and if vendors were, willing to actually pay their bills,
Yeah.
and then COVID and, that whole nonsense and that meltdown. But, I just always had faith. I always had faith that God had my back, and that he was looking out for me. And, I got married, and people are like, why are you getting married? And they're like, what are you doing? Don't get married. You can't trust women. You can't do it. All this sort of stuff that you hear in the zeitgeist. But no, I found a good woman, and I loved her, and I proposed to her. And then, a few years later, she's graduating. We're moving out of an apartment back into our parents' house, with maybe we can save enough money to get something. And one thing leads to another. And a year later, we have our own house. And a few months after that, we have a kid. And, and now I'm a stakeholder in this economy. And I don't really want to let that thing go. I want to keep going. I want to keep growing, and it was a snowball. It was like this tiny little thing, and a little bit more. And then all of a sudden it bloomed and blossomed, by the grace of God. And I think mostly it's just young people, especially coming from a secular point of view, they have no hope,
Yeah.
and their hope is, put your trust in, God, the government, God, the money, and, and yeah, right, dude, you'll be eaten alive.
Yeah. I think part of being a Trump supporter is you want to believe that you're going to be Trump yourself one day.
Yeah.
That you can, you don't want to tax the billionaires, because maybe one day we'll be one ourselves.
Yeah.
I think that's a part of, being a pioneer, and pioneer spirit, I should say.
Yeah.
And wanting to maintain the American vision, the American dream. But I think along the way, when you come up from a pretty humble beginning, that you find out that, you don't need to be a Trump billionaire to feel accomplished in the United States. You can feel accomplished earning a decent living and providing for your family, and
Yeah.
that eventually, when you reach that status, that is enough. For some people, it's not. Some people that they have to go beyond the providing for family, and I think that when you surpass the providing for your family stage, it becomes a little bit more of an ego race
Yeah,
for whoever's in charge.
for sure.
You know, you're really doing it for the mind, not so much for the family anymore, because there's only so much that a family really needs. Um, but yeah, I mean, pretty surreal process to go. I go from humble roots to you and your wife pretty much being self-employed and doing your thing, and my family being employed doing our thing with the company we started. And I think that there's a lot of hope once you establish yourself that you can start to build on.
Yep.
And that I think the message needs to be to not give up. And I think going back to college, you and I now are both college grads. I too also graduated college pretty late because I started in community college, did pretty well there pretty quick, transferred to our local Cal State Northridge, where I farted around and did a ridiculous consumer affairs degree that I had no interest in. So I ended up dropping out after a year and wasting my parents' money. And I just finally decided hey, I finally met a girl that I'm really into, and I really just want to go to work. And so I'm not going to continue wasting my parents' money on education. That's not going to get me anywhere.
Yep.
And until I finally worked enough jobs, established myself as a stakeholder in this economy, I finally realized that I want to fall back. And so that's when I finally decided I do want my college degree. So that's when I put myself through college, and I didn't graduate college until 2020. And I physically didn't get to walk the stage until 2022 because of COVID.
Yeah.
They stole that from me in 2020. But
Yeah.
thankfully, Great Canyon University pulled through, and they said, hey, come and walk down and, get your diploma and do the whole thing. And that was a pretty cool experience. So happy that was done. But like I always tell everybody, we had already started a company before you and I even graduated college.
Yeah.
It wasn't something that was completely necessary,
No.
and looking back on it now, it's just, it's debt that I have to pay off. Did it necessarily help me start my company? No. But I think it gave me maybe some shortcuts that I could, use, especially in finance department, things like that, and some know-how about the economy in general. And
Well, it helps to articulate your vision because you don't have a vocabulary,
no,
and it's so you go to school to get your vocabulary so that you can articulate that vision. And so, that's, my degree, I got my degree in business administration and totally pointless. I should have done finance or accounting or business law or, but, things that can actually, result into a career path, not just an obscure, I call it the humanities of the business degrees because it don't do shit for you.
entrepreneurial studies here.
Yeah. What is it? Yeah. But it's you don't know. You don't know what you're doing, and it's just you're we were balancing, work, life, and school at the same time, and it's just okay, what's going to get me to the end goal as fast as possible with the least amount of resistance?
Work, school, and personal life. Building a relationship with a woman, somebody that you got a lot of feelings for. I mean, that takes some skill. That's the three, tough ones in life. So I think we what do we say? Pulled up our boots from the bootstraps and made it happen.
Yep.
So, circling back to all the things that got us interested in politics. Can you tell me a little bit about maybe Obama era coming from 2008 to 2016 or 2012, and then having to basically transition and see the whole Hillary Trump face off, and just what your thoughts were and how you became a supporter of Trump.
To be honest, I didn't pay attention to any of that. I didn't become awakened until they started calling him a Nazi. And that's when I went, wait a minute, the kook on the Apprentice, he's a kook, but he's not a Nazi.
The guy who's been loved by Democrats his whole life.
I didn't even know that, I didn't. All I knew is that I saw him as a game show host. I thought it was a total joke when my buddy Wyatt was telling me that he's going to be the next president. I laughed in his face. I'm like, you are crazy. This guy's not a serious player. He's there for his brand, and I didn't take any of it seriously, but, I wasn't very politically active, I'm just, a snot-nosed college student chasing tail, like that's all I was really interested in. And yeah, but once I heard of that Nazi stuff, and then around this time we were working together, and you were just enlightening me to everything, and I just started looking into it, and you're like, oh, what about this and what about that? I'm like, yeah, that doesn't make sense. And then once you see it, you can't unsee it. And then the way I am, I'm like, I jump straight headfirst into the rabbit hole, and I dig until I can't stop. And then I just realized that they're lying about him, and then I realized, wow, they're lying about everything. And you know eventually 2020 came around, and I couldn't wait to vote for the guy. And then I remember election night sitting there watching, and then all of a sudden the vote stopped, and I'm like, well, I remember last time my mom told, I was off to bed, and my mom was like, Trump won, and I laughed out loud like, I can't believe what this country's come to. And then I just went to bed and woke up the next morning, and life was normal. But this 2020 election, okay, it stopped. What? And oh, we won't know for 3 weeks. What? And then I'm looking at the QAnon stuff and all the promises of that, and then I'm like, oh, it's gonna happen. All this crazy stuff about servers there, and and special marine, special forces, doing this and that, and I'm praying and hoping this is the truth. And then we're talking about, dude, we're gonna go to January 6th, and then all these at this point red flags are going off in my head. I'm like, yeah, I don't know if we want to go to that place. And sure enough, our our intuition was correct, because we were just being lambs led to slaughter. And and then come to find out, this whole, at least I believe, the QAnon thing was a psyop to get people to January 6th, so that they could create the impetus for the second impeachment of Trump. Is it the second? How many times has this guy been impeached?
Gosh, countless.
So I don't know. It was that was, yeah. It's kind of my a little bit of a background of my whole my journey to Trump. But yeah, no, we were actually gonna talk about the things that are going now. How you're kind of getting a little weary. You don't know if you're still on the Trump train too much.
I mean, I'm definitely still a conservative. I'm still pretty proud of the things that Trump is doing and leading the nation. I was pretty skeptical about Iran and the things that we're doing over there, and how this war has unfolded. I'm still not completely understanding how we're able to say that this is a war when Congress has to formally declare war in order for the United States to actively be at war. So I'm not understanding if this is just another media label, or if we are actively at war.
No, what did Russia call its special military operation? That they're still in that quagmire of Ukraine. What is that, going on 4 years or whatever?
And that's another thing. Trump was pretty adamant before he came into office. He said, I'm going to have that shut down in the first 90 days. Well, I could tell you that's one of the Trump deals that hasn't, been able to be sealed.
Yeah, I never believed that for a second, because when you have the Congress, and you have all of Europe, and you have, all the power centers, all the power centers of the Western, alliance, hooting and hollering for war, and they're frothing at the mouth to destroy Russia, to disassemble it, and gobble up all those resources for themselves. Because think about it. I mean, look at what's happened now. With Europe. Europe needs Russia. They just don't want what comes with Russia. They want Russia's, all of their stuff. So the whole Ukraine thing, the whole point of NATO was to squeeze, in my opinion, was to squeeze Russia, to collapse it, to break it apart into different states, and then to gobble them up into the European Union, and then therefore to secure all of their natural resource needs and everything that they need to compete on the global stage. However, turns out those Russians are a little bit more pig-headed and more resilient than they thought,
Yeah, I mean, targeting Russia, targeting Iran. I mean, what's the play here? Target the biggest geographic regions on the planet and try to
Well,
dismantle them?
Europe doesn't want anything to do with Iran.
It's
So
just
this is where I'm kind of looking at the way the chess pieces are being moved around on the board. And when I think it was in November of last year, Trump put out his like the national security doctrine or something like this, and he was talking about basically that's I don't know if you heard like the Monroe doctrine, going back to the Monroe, where we're focusing more on the Western Hemisphere and and worried about that. But at the same time, you have to look at the tools or at the, how would you say, the foundation of of basically what I'm trying to say is the pieces on the chessboard that are already in play, right? This is what you have to deal with. You can't just empty the pieces off and restart. That's just not real. And we know what happens when you just, say we just pulled out all of our resources and we're just focused on the home front. Well, all that's going to really do is that's just going to collapse our the petrodollar system that we rely on that gives our money value. The only reason that our we don't have hyperinflation and everything is because everyone trades in dollars. So that's what gives our dollar value. So if you create this huge power vacuum, I mean, we already had that, starting to emerge with BRICS, and their whole system to counteract the petrodollar, during the Biden administration. All you're going to do then is you're just going to give them more power, and basically the Middle East is a quagmire of war over resources, and it's petrochemicals, not only for oil but for fertilizer, and which we're learning about now, and how this war that Trump started is putting a lot of pressure on not only gas and obviously transportation costs and all that, but also on the farmers and fertilizers. So that's runs counter to his promises. However, if you're truly going to get out of the Middle East, then how do you do that in such a way to not create a power vacuum where China and Russia just swoop right in, and then now they exploit what was it, 20% of the world's gas flow or oil flows or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
It's that would be a huge strategic blunder for the America First agenda. What does America First mean? To me, not only does America First mean that our government actually cares about American citizens first, but that America is first in the world. Because at the end of the day, if we're not first, then we're not going to have the livelihood that our parents had. So, our empire is in its death throes, but I feel like Trump is being obstinate and saying, no, I'm going to break every norm, every international law that you think that we have to adhere to, because we're the attack dog, we're the police force that enforces international law, and we're doing this for everyone's benefit. And it's like, no more. We're doing it for our benefit. And yeah, it's dirty, but that's just the world. I mean, look at the way empires, all the way up until World War II, it's like we live in this illusion where just like, we think that the rest of the world was just this bunch of peace-loving hippies that everyone got along, and then the evil American and Western Empire grew, and they're a bunch of. It's like get out of here. That's not the way it was. Absolutely not. It's you had people or nations at odds with each other all the time. That's why we had World War II and World War One. That's America, or not America, but the entire world's been at perpetual warfare with itself forever.
Okay, so regarding the world economy and crude oil, energy dependence in the United States, and America First, I think a lot of people have questions about Israel, how it pertains to Iran and what we're doing there. This morning I saw Benny Johnson reporting that Japan just miraculously purchased 200,000 barrels of crude oil from the United States. All that was delivered this morning, and all that was possible because we shut down exports from Iran, and we had boats from Japan, cargo ships, oil ships, being able to come from Japan, go through the Panama Canal because Trump got China out of the Panama Canal, and then he also got Maduro out of Venezuela. And then he also was able to turn the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America.
Yes.
And now we have
Almost like he had a broader vision.
So I'm wondering, is this Trump 4D chess? Was Trump envisioning this as a way to create oil dependence for the United States again? Was he doing this because he was not persuaded, but was he influenced by Israel to attack Iran as a ally? People want to know, is he more doing this for Israel, or is this more of an America First tactic?
No, I just think this is when interests converge, you know. I don't think it's necessarily wrong what the critics of Israel are saying, that they want to do the greater Israel project and all that thing, and they want to rebuild the boundaries of the biblical Israel. I guarantee you that's probably true. Does that benefit in America? I don't know. Probably, maybe not, probably not. I mean, I don't really think that calculus even goes into play with what Trump's doing when you see those moves like you just highlighted with Panama. That was the first thing that he did. And then I think that maybe the first thing was the Gulf of America thing, you know, I don't know. Then the Panama, and then the Venezuela. So, you know, he's securing all these resources because he knows, okay, hey, if we try to topple Iran and we don't have our ducks in a row with a large enough supply, we're going to have $8, $10 a gallon. You know, when you see this, you know, debacle, and all we have is Biden's gas prices, I mean, that's pretty remarkable. It probably should be way worse, but that's because obviously him and his strategists planned for that, you know, and it most likely hinged on getting Maduro. And
I will say,
if that wasn't successful, then we wouldn't be in Iran right now. It had to be a new calculus.
I do remain skeptical just because I have seen $6 gas prices before, but I've never seen $7 gas prices, and I know that we're inching towards it. I was at running by the local gas stations today, and I see we're inching up towards $6.50, $6.60 a gallon, and I'm like, wow, we are really
because our genius lawmakers have done exactly what Europe has done. You know, it's like, go look at Europe's gas prices and then go look at California's, and, you know, like, what's the real difference between the bureaucracy of Brussels and the bureaucracy of the California government in terms of ideology? They're pretty much the same, you know, the same ideology, the Green New Deal, you know, the 15-minute cities, the 2030, you'll own nothing and be happy, you know, WEF program. And, you know, that there's no reason for California can be self-sustained. We have oil. We had oil refineries, but you know what, Conoco or Phillips or whatever it was, they left last year, or maybe this year, or maybe they're planning on it. You know, it's one of the biggest refineries that we had, you know, because, you know, oil's bad. Oil's evil, according to, you know, the liberal leftist ideology.
I still remain baffled, Cam, that...
But my point is our oil, a lot of our oil was, I heard, you know, something to be, you know, looked into, but I heard our oil is coming from the Middle East. So that's why we're seeing prices, you know, so much higher than the rest of the country.
Yeah, I still remain skeptical about how a country founded off of a revolutionary war that was from a minor tax on tea has somehow established one of the largest economies in the United States, California. And our population here seems to think that taxes will fix every problem that we have here, and that they've been basically indoctrinated into thinking that we should vote yes on every tax that's proposed by the legislature, and that we're going to be better off because of it. And I think one of those issues that even the Democrats have been talking about postponing recently in order to get into office, because we have an election coming up, is, you know, postponing the gas tax.
Yeah.
that was recently imposed because of our great California motor base here.
Yes. And well, don't forget the mileage tax that they want on top of that. Because we're all driving electric cars now, so we've lost money. So now we need to double dip on the gas, guzzlers, and then on the electric people. I think I saw 9 cents a mile,
Oh boy.
and what that would mean for me. I drive like, let's just say 10 cents for ease of mathematics. But I drive 30,000 miles a year. That's $3,000 in extra taxes. Huh. Okay, thank you, California. What is that, divided by 12? An extra 300 something dollars, 275, whatever, somewhere in that range. No thanks. I'm already pinching pennies over here. I'm trying to find ways to, lower my cost by even $50,
Yep.
So I don't need another $275 tax on top of it all. And then I thought we had the whole prop whatever, for our taxes on our house, our property tax or whatever. And then I watched my property taxes rise. And then, oh, guess what? We voted in a new amendment to raise property taxes on this assessment or whatever the heck. You're just like,
Well, a long time ago, and I think this was one of the conversations that actually gave me a big glimmer of hope when we were having one of our chats on the way to work when we were first starting our company together. We're in the van, and I was telling you how crippled with fear I was. I was pretty scared. I didn't like how the democratic thought process that was being imposed in California, I didn't like how so many youth were prescribing to this ideology. And you reassured me one thing about politics that I hadn't really thought about. And this was you were newly coming into politics, and you told me, hey, Spence, the pendulum always swings.
yep,
And ever since then, and this was when we had, I think, it must have been, who was in office back in, was it Trump in 2018? We have Trump, right?
yeah,
So it must have been maybe 2 years or a year into our venture. And I think maybe that's when we got Biden in right after Trump's first term.
yeah. We opened our business right when Trump's economy was kicking ass and taking names. So we
Yes.
were really benefiting really well from it.
Yeah.
Those first 2 years.
And so it was actually, I think, right in the beginning of COVID 2019. It was November of 2019. I remember we had some contracts up in the Bay Area lined up.
Yep.
And I'll never forget as amazing and fantastic the feeling was of cashing our first large check for the business. I'll never forget the feeling of having, 6 figures worth of jobs lined up, completely just wiped off the table because the California or federal government said we're shutting everything down,
Yeah.
and everything just went away.
Yeah. And our business is discretionary spending.
Yes.
So that doesn't bode well.
No. And so I was pretty fearful at that time. But then, we got Biden into office shortly after that. Once the COVID measures started sort of kind of taking over, it was right after that. So end of 2019, we rolled into 2020, and that's when we got Biden.
Yep.
And then it was just the full-on Biden lockdown measures.
Yeah.
And,
21 on.
and that was just, I mean, as many things as I didn't like that happened during COVID, there were some things I think that we saw that were pretty freaking amazing. We saw the takeoff of Bitcoin, which was, like I said, one of those anomalies in the economy that you only see once in your lifetime, something that could take, somebody with no dollars to, quite wealthy overnight. I don't think that happened to us. I think we were a little late to the party because we were lacking the confidence to jump in early, but it's still pretty
Paid
fantastic.
My taxes and got me in the house.
Yeah, there you go. Yep. So, some pretty crazy things that unfolded during that time. But what were some of the things during COVID that you think were a catalyst to getting Trump back into office come 2024?
Well, the heavy-handed approach. I don't think Americans like that. They don't appreciate that very much. I think in the beginning they understood, but then when things continued to drag on, and then, you started to see what seemed to be collusion between the federal government and the pharmaceutical companies, and jab number 1 and then number 2, and what are we on, like 18 now? I think they're still doing COVID jabs, and they're mandating. And just shortly before that, Operation Warp Speed, I'm hearing from all the Democrats, and I'm already vaccine skeptical, leading into this, and I don't, I'm not really agreeing with this whole thing. And then looking at, how long it usually takes for vaccines to get through the whole process, and then saying, oh, we're doing this whole, don't worry, perfectly safe. And then the Democrats are saying, oh, I'm never taking Trump's shot, never, never, never. And then, you know, all of a sudden they're mandating it. They're the ones forcing it. They're kicking people out of the military. Everyone's losing their jobs. It's just like the Democrats have just lost their marbles. And 6 months before that, they're telling me that they ain't getting 6 feet, you know, near that thing. It's just like, I'm certainly not taking it now, because now it's like this. I mean, people are getting Pfizer tattoos. Remember that craziness? That was wild, dude.
Well, this was for sure the first sign that Trump derangement syndrome was a real, psychological problem.
Yeah.
You had a vaccine labeled with Trump's name on it. Shortly, his predecessor, Biden comes in and takes over, and they all say, all hail the great COVID vaccine. He's rolling it out. And if he says, and his CDC says that it's, safe and effective, and that this is going to squash this, then let's do it. And while we're at it, let's beret the people not taking it with death threats.
Yep.
Let's shame them into submission.
All the scientists that are challenging, the science god, the new science god was revealed. I just saw something where it was like some college student just recently saw in a video saying something like, if the something to the sort that if it's not true, then it's not science, or basically meaning that science can't be overturned once it's determined fact. And it's like, no, that's not the way science works. You don't have all the facts, and that's why you're constantly testing until, someone else can test it and get the same result as the other one. Then it becomes established, when it can become repeatable. And we knew that it wasn't repeatable. And it was just like, well, we're just going to, have blind faith in the pharmaceutical gods and make them trillions of dollars at the expense of our health.
Yeah, I think, Charlie was not a big advocate of the things that basically happened through COVID either. He saw the collusion with the government, adding to the collusion, not only between our, three-letter agencies. We also saw collusion with social media platforms.
Oh, yeah, the Twitter files.
Oh, man, it's just filthy and dirty freaking backdoor deals and things with federal government. It's like
coercion.
Yeah, government spying on, different levels that, it's at this point in time, you should just expect it. It shouldn't be like is this happening anymore? This is just, well, we've got all the data, it's here, and this happened. So we need to just be more alert to these things as we watch more of these crazy events unfold in our lifetime. So with that being said, I think we have a lot more to say. And I think after this episode, we're definitely going to have you back to flush out some more thoughts, because it's always a pleasure talking with you, Cam. But I think we've reached our time limit here. So we'll call it a wrap on this episode. It's good to have you, and we'll see you back on the next episode of The Spark Show.
Peace.
See you guys. See you on the next one.